Kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome, those of you who are arriving and have made time for this Organic Week webinar. I think there's still a few people arriving, which is great.
If everyone who's coming in can pop themselves on mute straight away, that would be great.
And perhaps the panelists, perhaps everyone on mute, apart from myself as facilitator and Lou as coordinator, maybe. Yeah. Right. Well, let's make a start. Kia ora koutou anō. Welcome to you all. I'd like to welcome you to this Organic Week webinar, which is called A Guide to Organic Living During the Cost of Living Crisis. My name's Philippa Jamieson, and I'm joined today by 5 knowledgeable and passionate people who all live very organic lives without it costing the earth. Now, in a recent poll on the Organic Week Instagram page, we asked what is stopping people from eating more organic food or buying it, and the majority of people replied cost and availability.
Recording in progress.
We'll hopefully offer some ideas and inspiration on how you can get somehow I got muted there. I'll just go back. So this poll on the Organic Week Instagram page, we asked what's stopping you from eating more organic food, and most people said it was cost and availability. So we're going to talk today about some ideas and inspiration on how you can get more organic food or organic products into your lives, no matter who you are or where you live or how much you earn. And there's heaps of ways of doing this that don't involve you robbing a bank. Small incremental changes that can help you get better quality food, support your local economy, maybe grow some food yourself, and also grow community connections and knowledge and hopefully confidence. So just a quick bit of housekeeping about the webinar. We are set to go through to 1 p.m, but we're hoping, depending on people's time, that we may be able to go a little bit beyond that because there's so much to talk about in this topic. So we'll see how it goes. And we are recording this session. So please, everybody put themselves on mute. And if you have any questions as we go, please put them in the chat. If you can see the chat and type them in there. I'm also joined by Lou Vicente. Is that how you say your name, Lou? Lou will be monitoring the chat and bringing any questions from the chat that may be relevant as we go. So I'd now like to introduce our 5 panelists and start the conversation. So we have Robyn Guyton. Many people may know Robyn. I hear that she's originally from Otago. I didn't know that, but now a Riverton local for many years. And she's well known as a community organiser, grower, ecological historian, and advocate for Southland's natural resources. She's the backbone of Riverton's Environment Centre and has been crucial person behind several of the community's well-known organic and permaculture projects, like her own family's forest garden, the Heritage Orchard project, and a recently launched local resilience project, the Longwood Loop. So it's great to have you here today, Robyn. Also with us is Katrina Wolff. As I'm introducing the panelists, you might like to just give a wave so everyone can see who you are. Now, Katrina Wolff is a biodynamic soilpreneur, a compost consultant, and she has a business called Blue Borage. She helps home gardeners, workplaces, schools, community groups, and so on to design and implement compost systems to make gardening fully circular. And she uses biodynamic remedies. She teaches courses online as well as in person to grow, to learn basic biodynamics, grow delicious food and beautiful flowers in exquisite compost. Now, also with us, we have Sol Morgan. Sol, give us a wave. Soil has been, Sol, great name, Sol, almost soil. Sol started gardening with his mother at a very early age. He's also got a background in horticulture, having studied at Nelson Polytech, then Lincoln University, and has been involved for at least 30 years with community gardens, managing them and also teaching organic growing and permaculture. He's got a GrowWise consultancy business, helping people grow healthy crops and manage their home garden or lifestyle block as sustainably as possible. He does a whole heap of things in Golden Bay, including administering the Golden Bay Sustainable Living Centre. Now, we're nearly there. Oh, Nicola Galloway is another panelist. Hi, Nicola. Nicola is an award-winning food writer, chef, and author of 5 cookbooks, including her latest cookbook, The Homemade Table. Now, we're going to be giving away a copy of this book at the very end of the webinar to one lucky person who's attending, and that'll be a treat. So Nicola has been writing and photographing recipes for over 18 years, and her focus is making the most of seasonal produce from the garden, from your own home garden, and from local growers. She's a sourdough baker, fermenter, preserver. She teaches cooking workshops around New Zealand and lives in Nelson on a suburban quarter-acre section with fruit and nut trees, veggie gardens, and free-range chickens. And now, last but not least, our 5th panelist today is Alex Morrison. Hi, Alex. Alex is a former lawyer who now who co-founded and now runs Little Farms, which is an organic market garden business in the Wairarapa. And she grows produce on a leased quarter-acre plot using a no-dig lasagna method. And she also works with 7 other organic farms to collate and distribute their produce collectively through the weekly Little Farms veggie boxes. So welcome to our 5 panelists. I mean, there's just so much knowledge and experience right there. So I'm looking forward to starting this conversation. Let's begin now. We'll start with Robyn. Robyn, can you first tell us a little bit behind your motivations behind planting a forest garden, and particularly in founding the Riverton Organic Co-op? Over to you.
Yeah, so when we came to Riverton, we wanted to live the good life, and there was not many like-minded people, we thought. So I advertised for a meeting for organic gardeners and put in the school newsletters and things like that. And Perry Spiller from the Soil Health was speaking in Invercargill, so I got him to come the next night in Riverton. So of a town of 50,000, 26 people came, and in Riverton, a town of 1,000, 57 people came. And that's when it all started. Robert agreed to live in Southland after all. And half those people who came were older people who were grandparents who knew how to grow food. The other half were young families who came to Riverton where the cheap land was. Like our land was $6,000 for 2 acres. And so it was a perfect place to start. And then, so that just started us growing diversity, and the more we came across more plants that grew in Southland, because when we first came, we were told that fruit trees don't grow in Southland. And then we heard the heritage ones did. And so that took a obsession with collecting all the heritage fruit trees and along with the nuts, along with the natives and the berries. And so it just all kind of led on to the next thing. And so it was great to think, what if we hadn't organised that meeting? What if it happened at all? And within 2 years, we had an organic food co-op where we used the garage as a base, and we had a phone tree, and we'd get boxes of oranges from David Skinner and avocados from Doug Brown and grains and stuff, and we would order one big order together at a phone tree, and then we'd come pick it up, and there'll be no middleman. And that's how we could get an organic food co-op going in a town of 1,000 people in Southland.
That's great, Robyn. So can you just briefly say what do you think are the main benefits of starting a food co-op, and any just brief tips about how people might go about that?
So the benefits was that we could work together, because we didn't want to have a whole box of oranges and that kind of thing, and so we could work out how many boxes we could share. So it meant there was almost no waste, because we got enough just to share around. And also the community building, because we met all the people who wanted to buy organic food. It was really lovely to meet them, and friendships started up and different groups started from that. And so it's just like, instead of going to a supermarket, you actually meet other people interested in buying organic food, and then you become a community. You meet your tribe.
Yeah, that's great. And presumably the food is in season and cheaper, as you say, because you're cutting out the middleman,
Yeah,
middle
absolutely.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we still have a food co-op. We don't do a rigging tree anymore. We have it as a not-for-profit shop run by volunteers based in the Environment Centre. So the volunteers get 2% off per hour they volunteer, up to 15% off their food, but then we sell to the public, which gets the turnover really fast. So there's less losses. So it's still the same ethic, but it was easy for us just to fill the shelves up now and serve people. And then we extend the people who can do it. It's not just the co-op people, it's anyone who's travelling through.
Right. So it's kind of a hybrid model in a way.
It is now, yeah. That's
Yeah,
it's been like that for about 16, 20 years now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, great. Okay. Now I'll move on to Nicola. I just want to let's take a look at the kind of food that we're eating as a society these days. I mean, obviously there's a lot of processed food, packaged. You know, in the US, for example, about 50% of calories, I gather, are coming from ultra processed foods, and there's a lot of, you know, so-called convenience foods because people don't have time to cook. So Nicola, as a chef and a food writer who focuses on making, you know, simple, real, nutritious food from local ingredients, do you think that cooking or preparing food from scratch is kind of becoming a thing of the past, or is there a bit of a resurgence? Can you talk about that?
Well, I'd hope it wasn't a thing of the past, but I think in this, you know, very modern, busy world that we now find ourselves in, I think people can feel that making food from scratch is going to take too much effort. And I suppose part of what I'm trying to you know, share with my recipes, particularly with the homemade table cookbook, is that we used to do all that, and then we stopped doing that. And if you learn, you know, if you just focus on doing one thing, learning one thing, let's say, for example, making yogurt, it might seem complex to begin with, but then it becomes just part of your rhythm. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I think it's about prioritizing your time as well. We spend a lot of time on our screens these days, you know, like a lot of time. We're very addicted to them, and I think if you know, we can, I don't know how you undo that addiction for some people, but if we can try and go, okay, I'm getting off this, and yeah, and just go, I'm going to cook something. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be that you're making all your you know, your basics from scratch, because we can get a lot of those good quality from the supermarket, like yogurt, and it's not that expensive. But you know, just making home cooked meals, I think that's just such a good place to start if you're trying to get into making food from scratch. Is it's just focusing on that dinner to begin with, maybe just prioritizing that time to, you know, making meal plans is really helpful, or also setting aside a time during the week to maybe bulk prepare some food. So that might be some roasted vegetables, some nice toasted seeds that you can sprinkle over salads, just some simple things. You might maybe only need an hour or so, but they can add so much to your meals through the week. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah. So basically having a real think and getting a bit more organized, maybe setting aside some time, or like bulk cooking. I mean, actually I 3 days ago made a bulk lot of tabbouleh, and I've been eating it for the last 3 days. We've been eating it, and but you know, it's fine, you can mix and match it with other things, and
it's lovely to have, to have that
having
quick
prepared
food
it
you
already
can grab
is
the fridge and not go, oh, I'll just grab a packet, or I'll grab something in town. So I think that prioritizing time is the biggest thing. And I think, you know, if I think back to my nana's generation, let's say, so a couple of generations before me, you know, she had 5 kids, she worked as well, and she virtually made everything from scratch. And the biggest difference between then and now is that we don't have as many screen distractions. So I think it's just really prioritizing that time and just going, okay, I'm not going to sit on my phone now and waste an hour looking at social media. I'm just going to head to the kitchen. And I think it can also feed us as a deeper level, rather than just in our mouth. You know, it can in our body, it can feed us. It can be a creative practice. I find cooking very relaxing. It really calms me down at the end of a busy day. So I think there's much more than just eating, cooking and for eating. It's about, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, great, good point. Okay, now Sol, I'd like to bring you in here. Just want to think about what seems to be quite a commonly held belief, that organic and sustainable living and eating is a privilege for the rich. Yeah, that it's kind of too expensive for a lot of people. Now, you've been educating people about sustainable living, permaculture, organic growing, and so on for a long time. Can you share some ways that you think we could all live and eat more lightly on the earth and on our pockets in affordable ways?
Sure. I feel like I might be talking to the converted in many cases here, but you know, New Zealand at the beginning, when we all got carved up, all our sections were quarter acre. They were designed so that we could grow our food, and ideally we do this organically, for many reasons, of course. So those property sizes have changed, but you know, we could be looking at doing something together with other people, side by side in our smaller properties, or joining in a neighbourhood sort of level. So yeah, growing food is probably the first thing, and a bit like Nicola was saying too, that there's more to growing food than the food. There's what you get out of that process, has meaning, and of course it takes time. So prioritization is another piece in there. Jumping on from, it's just supporting Nicola's comments about food, you know, processing what you grow as well, as much as you can, is obviously a logical thing, and it saves us money. You know, processed foods are getting more and more expensive, so you know, making ratatouille or pasta sauce from tomatoes and other vegetables you've got in excess during the season, sauerkraut, kimchi, you know, drying herbs, saving seeds, taking all the fruit and pureeing it or processing it, when you have it, and then you can of course use it later on. That's the old, that's certainly what my mother did, and we endeavour to do it too. You know, making crackers and bread, and just exactly what Nicola was talking about. That whole piece is another big step that we can easily do, and I utterly agree that it just becomes a routine. And I guess the other thing on the home front, like whatever resources we have got in our garden, making the most of it, trying to create closed loops. So recycling our waste, what's left over from our meals, or and turning them into vermicast and compost, and making food for the soil again to grow more food. Harvesting our branches on our property, that may seem a pain to deal with. Having a chipper, they haven't made quiet ones yet, but chipping up your carbon and using that as a mulch. So again, we're reducing costs that we bring in, where we save time and money. And I guess the other one would be, if you do stuff close, then you're reducing your transport needs, driving less, and I guess biking more and stuff like that. So they're all sort of strategies that we can do to reduce the costs of living.
And what about from your experience with community gardens? Like how how well do they work for people? What opportunities are there for people to participate, to grow, to barter, to harvest, to swap tools, or share cost of that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing together and doing that is sharing. It makes a lot of sense. And it's energetic. It's an energetic exchange. We don't all need a lawnmower or a chipper. And there's many projects and many examples around the country where there've been different models of community garden, whether it's knocking down fences in your urban area and gardening that way, or whether you get a derelict abandoned bit of land down the road and all do it. But yeah, there's a massive benefit in doing it with other people for a whole lot of reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, in Dunedin here, I'm a member of a community orchard project, and we've worked really well with the council to identify pieces of land and the community where we can grow fruit trees and nut trees and berry bushes. And yeah, so I know there's a number of initiatives like that around the country. So that will be, really good to see more of that happening.
Yeah, there's over. So we started Aotearoa Community Gardens sort of network a couple of years ago. Matt Morrison and I, and now there's just finding out, and there's well over 200 in the country. In fact, I suspect if we put in whānau gardens, church gardens, and school gardens, it'd be more than double that. So the movement of growing together in a community garden sort of way is definitely a shift that way, and it's a great initiative.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, thank you. Now, I'd like to ask Katrina, what do you think are the main barriers for people starting to grow their own food or make compost or enhancing their soil, and barriers such as, like, they might not have a garden, they might rent and not be able to, or they might have only a balcony or something. And what ideas do you have to overcome these problems?
Okay, so many ideas, and it's also specific to each situation. So the work I'm doing is moving more into working with community groups, workplaces, schools, and talking with property maintenance professionals who've never been taught about composting. So the way our cities are designed, we're moving food waste and garden waste around in trucks when it really has never been necessary, never. Coming back to the apartment and people renting, I'm a lifelong rental tenant. I've lived in 15 different homes. I've had so many different gardens, and I think no one can tell us what we can put our heart and soul and energy into or not. So even if you don't own the land, you can give it all the love you want. And there's so much possible with container gardening. So I think for people renting, just to keep gardening kind of light and temporary, and have conversations with the landlords around fruit trees and things. For small spaces, I spent years living in Japan, Canada, Russia, and the green spaces in Japan and the public amenities we're amazing. And I think we can create those spaces here in Aotearoa. And it's so exciting seeing more workplaces come on board. You know, we do have this issue with the cost of food, but there's still plenty of money in this country, and it's up to us as kind of social society to say, hey, we need gardens in workplaces. We need composting to be visible in parks. We need schools to be growing and accessible through the summer holidays. We need our teachers to learn how to make compost. And our garden centres could be training institutions where people can see how to make soil, not just buy it in a plastic bag.
Yeah,
So-
great points. Yeah, I'm really interested in that whole thing about, you know, property managers and, you know, landlords, to see how they might, you know, come on board with it and how it might work, you know, for them as well as for the people renting.
Yeah.
That would be something to kind of explore
And I think also when we're looking at developing new town centres, and the architects and the engineers and the highly paid, often white middle class males are in those rooms, that get a consultant in and say, where are you going to make soil?
Yeah. And so what about people who do have a you know, who are in a workplace, like in an office or somewhere where, like, I mean, how do they best collect food scraps and make soil, or, you know, a Bokashi system, or what would you recommend?
Every workplace is different, and it depends if we're looking at garden waste and weeds and saying, stop spraying the weeds, we're going to eat from the soil that we make out of this material, or whether there's a cafeteria with a lot of food scraps. My instinct is to go with worm farming for food scraps and hot compost with the green waste. And always I'm studying the huapara kore verification, and there's this beautiful question, how do we elevate the mana of Hinea Huone? So for me, this is where food scraps are put into a receptacle, if that can be a moment of connection with the earth, and you know, we're not putting rubbish out. So this is a subpod have a beautiful in-ground worm system that's built into a container garden, so you can have food and flowers and pollinator space right there at that moment where the food goes into the soil. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do. It's often an hour-long conversation and exploring a workplace and going, have you ever thought about this? And it's often junior employees that are driving this change. So empowering those young people, we need you to speak up.
That's great. Yeah, and I really like that sense of connection. Like, I mean, I know how conflicted and awful I feel if I'm putting, you know, an apple core into a landfill rubbish. It's just wrong. But the connection that you have when you're putting it into a compost, it's just, yeah. These little, they're seemingly little things, but it's actually, it's a fundamental, it's fundamental, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Katrina. Now, Alex, let's bring you in here. I'm intrigued to know more about how you went from being a lawyer to founding the Little Farms Regenerative Organic Market Garden in South Wairarapa, I believe. Can you tell us a bit about your journey and what inspired you and what keeps you inspired, maybe?
Yes, of course. I'd just like to say that I agree with everything that's been said so far. It all resonates so much. And just the thing that I'm hearing from everyone is about how all of this stuff isn't just good for saving money and for the environment, but it's good for your soul. And I think that 100% connects into why I gave up being a lawyer to be a gardener and to grow food. So it really started with, I wanted to eat organic food, and I was living in Wellington where that was possible through lots of stores which stocked organic food. But when I moved to the Wairarapa, suddenly I couldn't buy organic food. There wasn't anywhere to do that, which made no sense because it's a rural area where food is grown. But the supply chains are a bit broken. So the food isn't eaten where it's grown, essentially. And so my friend and I thought, let's start growing our own large garden. We'll see if it turns into a market garden. It was an experiment. We were growing one day a week. So on a Sunday, we would come together and we would plant, grow food, make soil. And the other really interesting thing about it is we started with a $0 budget. So we had to set up this market garden with no bought inputs, which meant that we were labeled dumpster divers. But essentially we were taking everyone's waste products like cardboard and green waste and food waste and other things like that, and turning it into compost and soil. And that was how we started the market garden. So it's definitely possible to do it for next to no money. And then all that food you're growing is just in abundance. And so we started that 4 years ago now, and I haven't bought vegetables since. So that's the reason really. That makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
So I guess I didn't quite say how I gave up being a lawyer. Essentially having babies was the tipping point. So this is my second child. My oldest one is 3. And that just really put in perspective what's important in life, and that health for ourselves and our planet and our children, and being in good, healthy workspaces and environments. Obviously, being a lawyer is quite stressful. You're inside all day. And literally all I wanted to do was be outside with my babies. So that is what I do now.
Right. It sounds like a really healthy lifestyle shift. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Now I'll just go back another round of the panelists with some more questions. So coming back to you, Robyn, I just want to know a little bit more about the Longwood Loop. Now, perhaps if you can tell us what it is, how it works, and how it might be replicated or be used as a model for other areas in New Zealand.
So the Longwood Loop started when we had growers travelling 40 k's to bring us their tomatoes or things, and 40 k's back to the food co-op. And I realised a lot of travel for them, and also the fact that everyone goes to the city for their food. So everyone goes to the supermarkets in the town. There's really pretty much dairies in it, the 8 main towns in Western Southland. And what there is a road that connects all of Western Southland together. It was an old trading route that we used to have before the supermarket. So instead of using that loop to trade, everyone just goes up to 80 k's and back to the city to buy food. And so I thought if I can find a way to connect all those little towns, we can start trading again and enliven them, because most towns don't have a shop or a garage or even a school. They all became, there used to be something like 26 schools, and now there's only 5 in the whole of Western Southland. And so I thought if we can get that happening again, we could do the trade. And we applied for funding for an electric van, which we got some funding locally, not nationally. We crowdfunded for the balance. And then we found a really good software platform called Open Food Network. And Open Food Network is ideal for direct sales. And I had a battle with the environmental health officer at District Council saying every single grower has to be registered with MPI. And then we went into lockdown in August 18 months ago again, and I just said I was going here to do it because it's their right to do it, and it's direct sales. And he got a lawyer in Dunedin who agreed with him, and I said I'm going to do it anyway. I told him that there's going to be a famine in 2 years' time, and his name will go down in history as someone who didn't let us develop local trade, and children will die. And so he was got a bit worried. He rang up National MPI, and Simon Holster's in there, and he said he agrees with me. It's direct sales. The van is just the courier, and people can buy food directly on the internet and get delivered. And so there's no retail, and I can do it. So it's fantastic. And so once a week, the online Open Food Network opens up, so the growers put up what they have spare or they've grown for the loop, and then that's before 9:30 on Monday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, everyone can order around Western Southland, and then we collect those. So the people buy once from as many growers as they like in Western Southland. We've got 30 so far. And then so they pay once, and then Environment Centre pays the growers once. There's only 2 exchanges of money for each one. And we have volunteer drivers who drive around the loop, and it's a little bit, because it's quite a big area, it's 165 k's around there. we have a little bit of ingenuity between times, because someone might want something that's at the start of the loop or at the end, we can't get it to them. So I've got people in each town who say, I come work as a caregiver, and I can bring stuff from Ojai early. So we have these little people who do the tweaks, because it's not a perfect, so a one loop, kind of thing. And it's working really well. And so we're, without much advertising, we're just in the trialing stage. We're selling about 4,000 a month already. And that's all the money, 100% goes to the grower, and the buyer pays 10% more, and that pays for the software's 2% off the trade. The van probably takes another 2%, and then paying the accountant. And so it's the buyer gets 100%. There's no markup for them. And it's working really well. And it could work also in a city. It could work just with utilising your local shopping centre. So you could do the same Open Food Network software. It's all set up for you, and just advertise what you've got in your suburb, and then you have a time where you'll meet and do the swaps, and it's all prepaid.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So people can look that up online if they want to know more about the Longwood Loop. What's the website there, Robyn?
Just go to the Longwood Loop, it comes up. Yeah.
I've just popped the details into the chat so everyone can look at it if they need to. The website address for Longwood Loop and the Open Food Network.
And so it just means that people, the best thing is, unlike a farmer's market, the people know how many lettuces to pick. So there's they're prepaid. So if he sells 6 lettuces, he picks 6 lettuces, the rest can stay in the ground for next week. So there's absolutely no waste. And everything's delivered, that's picked the night before or that morning, it's delivered that day. So it's super fresh, no waste, carbon neutral with electric van. That's really good. Yeah,
it's fabulous. Great initiative. Yeah. Okay, now let's come back to you, Nicola. Now you live in an urban property and you grow fruit and veggies and so on. Can you tell us how much of your own food do you produce and for your family, and how can we encourage more people to plant food, not lawns or, so many ornamentals?
Well, it depends on the time of year of how much we're, summertime, obviously we're growing a lot more, really buying in much else. And then we live in quite a cold valley, and we have quite limited sun hours in the winter. So that's a little bit different. So that's, but I don't think it's all about us having to grow everything in our own property. And I think that's sort of already been touched on already. That's not the point. And it was wonderful to hear what Robyn set up. That's just such an amazing arrangement. We many years ago I set up quite a slightly different model because we didn't have electric cars at that point, but Fresh to You, which was an organic food delivery business with Wolff, who was an organic grower at the time, and that's what he was growing. He was growing all the produce, and we were people were ordering, we're putting into boxes and delivering it, and one person was driving around and delivering it to their homes. So, and we were buying in from other organic growers. So a bit of a different setup, but there are so many other possibilities. I don't think it's all about having to grow it on your own property. And I'm also aware that we're very privileged to have a property where we can grow food. Where fruit trees is probably the biggest thing that we've spent time working out to have almost a full supply of fruit year round. I mean, there's a few gaps, but we've got avocados now, we've got citrus, and then all lots of stone fruits. So we have, and then Sol mentioned it earlier. It's when we have excess, like at the moment, it's feijoas, plums, apples, whatever. We prioritise that time, and we just get down as a family, and we process it. The kids don't have a choice. Sorry, but I'm not doing it all myself. So as a family, someone might, the kids have to go collect the feijoas, for example, at the moment, and then we scoop them, and then I'll cook them up, and then we'll process them. It's not quite answering your question, but it's sort of gone a little bit off track there. But to sort of go back to the growing, I don't think it's all about us having to grow everything in our own backyards. And if you don't have your own garden, well, obviously container garden is one option. And my always, for me, like through that winter block when we're not growing, we don't have the sun hours to grow, sort of root vegetables and things like that. Let's say my priority is always going to be herbs and leafy greens. And I think that's just such a good place to start if you're growing at home. I mean, I don't ever buy herbs. I have, they just self-seed around the garden, or I've got a pot of rosemary and thyme and all those things. And it means with any time I'm cooking, I can just go out to the garden and grab some herbs to add to my cooking, and that can just make it taste really good quite easily. And then bulk up those parsley and things and basil to make into pestos. And then the other thing is connecting in again with it doesn't have, there's community, there's farmers markets. I just think, so what I don't grow, I go to the farmers market and buy the other stuff, and if you think, and there are things I grab at the supermarket too, just for ease, but I generally will, okay, we're growing this, then I go to market and I get a few other bits and pieces, and whatever, and then there's certain things that if there's just isn't, like, of course there is no tomatoes and cucumbers that naturally grow through winter. We just don't eat them fresh through winter. It's just, I haven't really done that since I learnt that was the case. And I just sort of find it a little bit odd that we feel quite reliant and that we still need these foods at our fingertips, when honestly, a fresh sun-ripened tomato or cucumber or, other summer produce eaten from the garden is just, it's just the most amazing thing. It makes it more delicious than if we have them all round and year round. So slightly off track there a little bit again, but I don't think it's, to answer your question, yes, we grow quite a lot of food, but that's not really what we're trying to achieve either. I'm all about community, supporting community growers and producers as well. For me, home growing is not just about growing it yourself, it's about also accessing and tapping into your community to get your food as local as possible.
Yep, great. Actually, that seasonality thing, just before we came online with the webinar, the panelists were bringing up that topic of seasonality. And I just want to come back to you, Alex, on that point, because I think you had some interesting thoughts on that too, eating seasonally. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yes, so it's actually the thing that we've been struggling with the most is trying to convince people to eat seasonally. So we have seasonal veggie boxes that we distribute, and the number one piece of feedback that we get from people is essentially a bit of a complaint that they don't have tomatoes in the middle of winter. And yeah, so we kind of had to start this whole education campaign around really showing people what's growing in the garden at different times of year and explaining there's no way that tomatoes could grow in this. And if we were trying to artificially grow tomatoes, what that would involve and how that isn't how we want to eat food. That's it's an option out there if you want to, and there's ways to get it, but that's not what we do. So yeah, explaining that for the benefit to eat that local food, it needs to be seasonal, and also the difference between seasonal and different regions. So what, say, Northland can grow versus Southland is quite different. So just because you can see that your cousin's eating something doesn't mean that you can where you are. So it's that regional, seasonal food. And just learning to eat with it.
Yeah. Alex, how long have you been growing as a market gardener?
So we're coming up 4 years. But before this, I did work, while I was studying to be a lawyer, I did work on a large organic farm. So I did have a little bit of a background.
Yeah. And I've just noticed a question in the chat from Gianni. Do you have any insights or tips for plugging the hungry gap, he says? So that's often the kind of early to mid-spring when there's not too much around in the way of veggies and possibly fruit too.
Yeah, so we're actually kind of in one now as well, and that all of the summer crops are out and we're kind of waiting for those winter crops. So in these times of the year, we're eating a lot of greens. And what's really interesting is that that's what our bodies need, right? So the seasons provide us the food that is what we need for our immunity and all of those things. That's why we have citrus in winter and lots of leafy greens. So it does, it might be less exciting, but that's what we eat right now. And things like brassicas and cabbages will be coming on. But when we have that abundance, it is really a lot about preserving it, keeping it, chopping it up, putting it in the freezer, so that then you can fill those gaps with that produce from when you had an abundance. So it is kind of a whole lifestyle to it.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I just sort of on that seasonality thing, nobody's mentioned foraging yet, but I'm a big fan of eating the weeds that grow in my garden, like the puha. The miner's lettuce is coming up now because it's the cooler months, and dandelion leaves. I'm a really big fan of dandelion leaves in my salads. Full of nutrition. Yeah, they're bitter, but you know, we need a bit of bitter sometimes. So yeah, so I'm very much in favor of those greens. Yeah, cool. Now I'm just looking at my long list of questions here. We're at 1:45, so I think we've got a couple more topics we could talk about. I'll come back to you, Sol. Now, this is kind of maybe a little bit more of a political thing about food security and potentially food sovereignty. But Sol, have you got any ideas about what communities should be doing to become more self-reliant on food, and what pressures we could put on our councils or government to do things like, should we have a national food strategy, or you know, councils, how could they you know, think about food in their regions and plan for it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the answer is yes. I mean, it is an election year too, eh? So you know, lobbying is always a good thing. It's a funny space, the food secure communities space, in a sense that it's often driven by suppliers, big producers or even producers, and somehow council and even government, you know, I feel like it's left to into the producer space, if that makes sense. It's kind of but in terms of resiliency, and I think it aligns, it's more of an issue these days with the issue of vulnerability, and you know, in Golden Bay here, we you know, we're about to get 400 mils, so we've already had a lot, and you know, the hill can, one way in, one way out, and the hill can collapse, and it has. So it was relying on barging in food. So that's just our community, and of course there's some, we know the other examples in New Zealand already, Hawke's Bay, Northland, they've had hard times. So part of it gets back to this preparedness, and I think yeah, lobbying local government. I was just part of a process of community groups, or community members were invited to participate in feeding back to the long-term plans. So that's one space, and they seemed open to it. The downside is that often they end up prioritizing what's important, and you know, that just because you submit and there's a number of people who say this is a really good idea doesn't mean it happens. So another part of it, I think, in the end, we ought to just act local, and go for it. So getting everybody in the room to talk, from civil defence, farmers, growers, producers, consumers, transport people, all of it in the room, and start developing local food strategies, or what, there's lots of names. I was really pleased to see the Korahira Kai Movement Zero Hunger Collective, which is a bunch of organisations in New Zealand, are doing, they've got a paper coming out near the end of this month in terms of researching this space and what people are doing in this country. And there are a whole pile of initiatives. So yeah, watch that. Maybe Organic NZ could do an article on that piece. Yeah, I think it's the time is right for coming together as a community and bringing those different players together, and just figuring out what we can do, like what's been said, what we can do in our region. We're often caught in the loop of having to produce something and exporting it out in terms of making, you know, real money. But in terms of where we're at with I think our vulnerability with climate change and earthquakes and whatnot, the more we can get stuff locally and organise it, and then ultimately educate people about, hey, supporting local is of benefit to you, and it's a necessity to not just do it as a fad or when when there's a real crisis, to continue doing it when there's not, to support the growers and the producers locally, as opposed to putting your money elsewhere and outside of the region.
Yeah, that's really good, Sol, and very pertinent with the ongoing extreme weather events that we've been having, or many places around the country. I just thought I'd come back to Katrina and maybe continue on that theme about and a bit more about what people can do in their own gardens, or if they're gardening in community or workplaces or whatever, to kind of climate proof, if you like, climate proof their gardens or farms or growing.
Oh, that's a big question. And for me personally, I try and switch off from a lot of the science and just tune into the land. And as a biodynamic practitioner, it's observing the moon cycles, being kind of aware of the sunrise and observing the night sky, and just remaining almost like a tree rooted in the soil. Like we can trust our observational skills and respond kind of in the moment and learn to deal with the climate events that are happening. I find when I start looking into the science and watching the scientists debate with each other, that it all gets so big, and a lot of them aren't making compost, that I would rather talk to people with hands in the soil, developing gardens. That I guess a few suggestions would be the biodynamic preparations will build soil depth, so your roots are going down further, they're accessing water from deeper underground, so they're more drought tolerant, and they're holding more water, so that when we have these sort of huge amounts of water falling on the soil, that there's less runoff, there's more held in the ground. Then, of course, there's rainwater harvesting, so that we can be more self-reliant. And the last year, where I've been living on this lifestyle block in Whangarata, I have a composting toilet, and it's been fascinating to realize that when we make human your compost, there's no water required, none whatsoever. That, you know, when you look at the wastewater being pushed out into the ocean and the pollution that's out there, that why we ever decided to put this material underground in pipes and use drinking water to flush it around, it's, yeah, I wish the engineers could.
Yeah,
Kind of
crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I answered your question.
Oh no, that was good. Yeah. There's I mean, there's so much we potentially could talk about. So yeah, I think we're going to have to maybe start wrapping things up a little bit, because I know some people will have to go at around 1. So what I just want to have a mini break while we go to the winner of the book, Nicola Galloway's book, The Homemade Table. We have a copy to give away. And Lou, would you like to make that announcement of who the lucky winner is?
Hi, absolutely. I've just put everyone's names from who registered today into the wheelofnames.com, and Sarah McFadden has come up. So Sarah McFadden, you are the lucky winner of Nicola's Homemade Table. So if you can maybe drop your email address into the chat, and I can get in touch, and Nicola can send you the book. Are you here, Sarah? Maybe just drop a message, or you can unmute yourself. Yay, she's there. Fantastic, brilliant. Drop your email address down, and and Nicola can see that, and we'll get your address. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, congratulations, Sarah. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. Nicola has so many great recipes, and I remember when I was Organic NZ editor, and Nicola was writing sometimes for Organic NZ magazine, which was great. Now, I think what we'll do is just have a very quick wrap up from all the 5 panelists. I'd like to just hear from you what you think your, like, just one really top tip, or, you know, super easy to get handy hint from what we've talked about today, or even maybe something that we haven't talked about but you think is pretty pertinent. Okay, starting with Nicola.
Right, unmute, there we go. I also, I've got a top tip, but I also wanted to, I was going to touch on foraging, so I'm so glad that had come up. I think there were meant to be 3 questions, and that was going to be talked about on my 3rd question. So foraging, yes. And another thing, you know, if you don't have a garden, is that there are, well, I'm not aware of completely around the country, but in Nelson, and in Nelson and Tasman and Marlborough, we actually have a fruit map that's on Google. So it's called Nelson Marlborough Fruit Map. And if you go there, it has all the public, free, available fruit trees where you can go and collect fruit. Obviously, you don't take the whole tree when you do that, or all the fruit. You take some and leave some for others. So there are so many other ways of accessing food beyond having to pay for it too. So there's, and then foraging wild weeds, as you talked about. And so my top tip actually ties into that, is and about going back to right at the beginning when you asked me about making food from scratch. Or one of the first thing, well, one thing is start with 1 or 2 things. Don't try and make everything at once from scratch. So don't think, right, I'm going to make bread and crackers and da-da-da. You just tire and you don't do it. So 1 or 2 things at a time. And my first thing I would always say to people is pesto or some kind of green sauce. So, and I'm not talking about pesto of pine nuts and parmesan. I'm talking about, fresh herbs and wild weeds if you want as well from your garden. Well, I like to call them wild herbs, not weeds. And you can use toasted sunflower seeds. Putting a little bit of miso in there can bring in that umami-ness that you'd get from the parmesan. Obviously, garlic, lemon, lime, apple cider vinegar if they're out of season, and then olive oil. And I always have some form of green sauce in the fridge because 1, it's super nutritious. And 2, it's just a really quick thing that I can add to any meal to kind of brighten it up.
Right. Excellent tips there. Thanks, Nicola. Okay, now let's hear from you, Alex. Have you, I'm putting everyone on the spot here. What's your super top tip?
So actually from this webinar, I've noticed that a few of the other panelists have dirty fingernails, and I looked at my own and I have it. And so that's my top tip. Get your fingernails dirty, because if you get your hands in the soil, it's like a gateway drug, and it will change your mind about everything. And you will be suddenly preserving all the food that you grow because it means so much, because you know how hard it is to grow it. You'll want to be buying off other local growers because you get it. So it's just get your hands in the soil, and then everything else will follow.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. How can you go wrong? Yeah. Now, how about you, Robyn? What's your top tip from today?
So I just think about forest gardens are really resilient, and I think that's something that is coming around the world, that they are resistant to too much wind, not enough rain, too much rain, all those things. And we were originally humans sort of were woodland dwellers, and I can see that's really relevant because perennial food's always there for you. So there's stuff that you can eat all year round in your garden, and also eat your weeds like nettle, alexanders, there's artichokes, all different things that grow all year round no matter what the weather's like. And I think we should be moving to include a lot of perennial vegetables and plants in our diet, and even edible leaves. Now the new things, lots of leaves you can actually eat. We don't even realise that they are. So expand your diet so you're not reliant on annuals.
Great. Yep, thanks, Robyn. Okay, how about Sol? What do you think's your best tip from today?
Well, that's easy. So I utterly agree, putting your hands in the dirt, and the other part is grow with others. So So this is how we would have all done it. Like it's a cultural thing. So being part of a community garden, or in particular Fertile Ground Collective, there's 7 of us with add-ons, all the family members and whatnot. It's a family we have. Really, we meet every Monday and grow all our bulk vegetables together at one place. And it's more than just growing food. It's good for your mental well-being, getting your hands in the dirt, but also a social connection. And you can go and process all your woes or get support each other. Grow together, grow with other people. Knock down your fences if you're living in the cities, and often or talk to people, some elderlies perhaps, or people who can't. They've got a bare bit of land. Ask them if you could use it, and get find out from others. To put a post up or put a notice up and see who's interested in your locale, your close area. So you could have these little pods of grower collectives or community gardens all around New Zealand. That's ultimate resilience too.
Yeah.
Connected.
Yes, brilliant. Yeah, and just want to draw people's attention that Lou is putting a lot of these tips in the chat too, and I guess that that'll be captured as well along with the recording, will it?
Yeah, we'll put the recording live, and I was thinking we'd collect a blog and publish that with all of the tips in there as well.
Great. Yeah.
We'll send that out.
And now I'll come back to Katrina, our fifth. Well, one of our 5 panelists, for your summing up and what your top tip or insight would be.
Okay, for me, I think the how to is all out there, but for me, it's asking people to be courageous and share their skills, ask the questions, and there's something about making composting visible and transparent. And I recently put my hand up at an event asking if composting could be an art form. Can we make it a performance art? Can we call on our artists to beautify our compost piles and make them worthy of being in the sort of grand entrances of workplaces and shopping malls, and take pride in localizing our soil making? And I think the make soil and the share waste, it's lovely to know someone up the road who's making compost you can drop your food scraps off. But if you can take that next step and not just drop them off, but get your hands in the soil, and even if you can't compost at home, learning a little bit more about how it's done will help you get a compost bin installed at a community space or school or workplace. So yeah, asking people to step up and get involved.
Great. So maybe instead of wine tastings, we can have compost smellings. We can have aroma, savoring of different varieties of compost.
But we've just got to make more of it. So the build compost parties, throw the stuff on
Compost parties, love it. Yeah, that's great. Hey, well, now I'm just looking at the time. We're at just 3 minutes past 1. Now, I'm just aware that some people will have to go shortly. I don't know if anyone wants to continue on a little bit, if we have any other burning questions from the chat, maybe, Lou, or is there any other questions?
Let's have a look, see if there's any questions in the chat that we've missed. I'll just have a quick scroll up. Bear with me.
Can I butt in a little bit?
Absolutely, Alison.
I want to advertise the talk that I'm giving tomorrow, which is on New Zealand's Dirty Dozen. Now, most of our speakers, all of our speakers that I've heard today, and it's been really inspiring to listen to you all, are beyond this. But if you have friends who are not so certain about organics and want to buy what's convenient at the supermarket, New Zealand's Dirty Dozen is the food that's more likely to have pesticide residues. So you can tell your friends, well, at least if you avoid buying those from the supermarket and buy those organic. It's a step. So that's $2.45 tomorrow. Register through Organic Week. Thank you.
I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. Thanks, Alison. I've got one thing here from Cocolito. They're saying, we also need to educate people about the true value of food. Cheap food usually happens at the expense of the health of soil, air and water. What does it need for people to prioritize healthy and sustainable produced food over a latte or an overseas trip? It's a really good question.
Would anyone like to answer that one or talk about that? Any of our panelists? Yep, Sol.
So how do we prioritize that is the question? Yeah. I mean, I guess it's looking at food as being more than just something we stick in our mouth, that it's actually it's health insurance. So, you know, it ultimately it saves, you know, the idea of going to the doctor as another piece in the puzzle. It's intimately linked to that. And also, if you're supporting local and buying local, then of course you're also investing in local economy, where the money stays longer and it spins around the area. Also, you're contributing to the footprint, your own footprint, if you're doing it yourself or buying local, because these are the transportation costs we all know are going up. So it's a multifaceted thing. Is what is our impact? What that our money, when we buy something that's costs more, that should be a good thing in some ways. It should be a value. There's a value in that, in the sense that your money goes further, really, in a sense that you're getting more nutrition from what you're eating, you're supporting the local economy, you're doing your piece for the environment, or in this case, the world, with climate change and other things. You really are participating a lot more in making a difference. It's the power we have. It's a power. It's our superpower. Yeah. Something like that. It's an empowerment thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we choose to spend our money on, like I went to the Otago Farmers Market the other week, and Oamaru Organics had broccoli for $3 a head, beautiful looking organic broccoli. And I thought, people are spending $6 on a coffee, which is of marginal benefit, and here's this beautiful broccoli that's half that price. I know which one I'd prioritize. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just thinking it's 1:08 p.m. and I know that some people have to leave, so I think probably we should wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no more questions in the chat, Philippa.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, I really appreciate all of you panelists for sharing your experiences, your ideas, and your ongoing work in the community is really inspirational, fantastic. And I hope that everybody who has attended today has got some ideas and, may think a bit differently about how organic food doesn't have to cost the earth or doesn't have to, get you out of pocket. So thank you very much for attending, everyone. I hope you're enjoying Organic Week wherever you are, and hopefully ka kite anō. Okay, so
thanks everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Thanks, Philippa and Lou.
Thanks, panelists.
Thank you, everyone. Really inspiring to listen to everyone. Great.
Thanks, Alison. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Keep up the good work, guys.
Lou, do you have the email or the email address